Winter, 1889. In New York, people are buried in the snow. Here, our flowers are blooming and our oranges are about to bear. Let's hold a festival to tell people about paradise. Professor Charles F. Holder, founder, Valley Hunt Club and Tournament of Roses. On January 1st, 1890, the Tournament of Roses was born. Come New Year's Day, most all of us could be found along the parade route, waving at the passing carriages or setting up in the town lot to watch the foot races and tugs of war. In 1893, when New Year's first fell on a Sunday, we went so far as to strike a deal with God. We wouldn't hold the festival on a Sunday if he promised not to let it rain on festival days. Only 10 rainy parades in 125 years ain't too bad. In 1902, 8,500 of us arrived to fill 1,000 seats for the very first football game of the tournament. But after watching Stanford lose that first game, 49-0, well, let's just say it would be a long time before we brought the pigskin back for New Year's Day. This was a festival built on tradition, teamwork, and community. Well, just ask Hallie Woods, the first Rose Queen, who not only helped to decorate the float she rode on, she made her own dress. It wasn't long before the automobile arrived. Soon our floats became so spectacular, wires along the parade route had to be raised. Innovators like Isabella Coleman had developed techniques that made for bigger and more awe-inspiring floats. The crowds grew and grew. In 1912, the aviator C.P. Rogers, after completing the first transcontinental flight across the U.S., flew over the parade route in his famous plane and dropped roses onto us from 100 feet above. The festival, like the country around it, was on the move. In 1916, football returned to the Tournament of Roses. The Rose Bowl game was here to stay.
Well, good afternoon, football.
By the end of the 1920s, the Rose Parade was being broadcast on coast-to-coast radio, and movie houses featured it on the silver screen. The parade was becoming a source of fantasy, an escape from the hardship of day-to-day life.
To Mr. Charles Cobb, President, Tournament of Roses. Dear Charlie, how in a depression year you put over the most wonderful parade of all times is a mystery to me.
The Rose Parade was proving itself to be a symbol of hope for the new year. In 1942, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the Rose Bowl game was moved with only 24 days' notice to Durham, North Carolina. But come New Year's Day, the Rose Queen and her court, heads held high, still rode down a near-empty parade route. Once again, tradition had pulled us through. Once the war was over, we celebrated. With the advent of television, the Rose Parade was becoming available to a national audience in a whole new way. The impossible was becoming possible.
Communication satellite linking North America and Europe. Japan, province of British Columbia, Mexico.
And an American took his first steps on the moon. Now that the parade was no longer limited just to the West, we took our place on a global stage.
Yo soy Pelé, yo soy el Gran Marshal.
Lieutenant David G. Raymond, a former prisoner of war, who today represents all of the men of the service.
Somebody to be proud of indeed as we talk about the heritage of America. Hank Aaron, a great
We
athlete.
became a symbol of civil and cultural equality. Every New Year's Day in Pasadena, we are all a part of one international parade. When then-President Ronald Reagan signed legislation proclaiming the rose America's flower, he made official what we already knew here in Pasadena. For the love of man and woman, for the love of mankind and God, for the love of country, Americans who would speak the language of the heart do so with a rose. Today we live in an altogether different time. In 2013, the parade was seen by 84 million people on worldwide television and viewed on the web an estimated 13 million times. It was broadcast to 174 countries in 20 languages.
And I think we're going to have a beautiful parade.
Grand Marshal.
The excitement that always goes with this January 1st in Pasadena, California.
Boys, he got time. He's throwing deep to McKay, and it's a touchdown!
Kept it on the ground, and now it's Hudson over the top. Touchdown!
But even after 125 years, you'll still find floats riding down the same Pasadena streets they did in 1890. Floats that are still built in much the same way they were in the beginning. And you'll still wave to one Rose Queen, and you'll still meet the same Pasadena families, all of them gathered to celebrate the symbol that still grows from the heart of our city, a rose blooming in the midst of winter.